Welcome. My name is Erich Reed, and I'm the director of the Southwest Harbor Public Library. Thank you so much for joining us. We are going to start an ongoing holiday book sale starting this coming weekend from 10 o'clock to 1 o'clock, this Saturday and Sunday, and our sale will continue during library open hours afterwards, and we will continue to offer fresh gift-ready books, throughout the month. We also feature a raffle for the coveted gallon of Holly Masterson's fresh scallops. So please come in or email us your raffle orders. Next Tuesday at the same time, we'll welcome Robin Wood with an event associated with her acclaimed book Fieldhouse, and another Zoom event. So hopefully you can join us then. So tonight we are recording this program, and it'll be accessible later this week on our library YouTube channel. We'll have a question and answer session at the end of this program, so please use the chat feature throughout to ask questions. I'll facilitate the questions as they come through during the chat. John Putnam, our speaker tonight, is a full-time nature and landscape photographer living in Mount Desert Island with a shop on the same block as the library. He's an instructor as well and offers small group workshops and tours. His work has been awarded and exhibited internationally, and most of us all had his work closely in hand when his photo of the owls adorn the Acadia Park Pass in 2019. The library is featuring his photography throughout December, so please come in and take a look. It'll be a great show. Please warmly welcome John Putnam.
Hi, everyone. Thanks everybody for coming. So I'm just going to kind of get started here, but I just need a second to arrange myself. I have multiple screens going on. That's how big of a deal this is. So let me just get situated here, and we'll get going. Actually, before I do that, now let's just do that. Okay. So I want to begin with a disclaimer. This is the first time I've given this presentation. In fact, I put it together just for this event, and I didn't give myself a lot of time. It's a little rough around the edges and certainly does not communicate everything that I want to say about the topic. The topic, finding peace in an overcrowded park, is something I've been thinking a lot about, and it will certainly be a major part of future projects of mine. But with this presentation, I've just begun to put ideas down in writing and in pictures. Anyway, well, let's get started here. So Acadia National Park, it's not pristine. The trails are wide and they're overused. In the warmer months, the air quality is often poor. And in the summer and the fall, of course, it's very, very crowded. So as a nature photographer, why do I love it so much? Well, for one, it's home. And two, I can see beyond the crowds, and I can see beyond that ever-present human element. And I can see into the park's natural history. So let me give you an example of that. So roughly 220 feet above sea level on Gore Mountain is a cave. And wedged into the back of that small cave are half a dozen round boulders, which you see here. Each, maybe 2 to 3 times the size of a watermelon. At the base of the mountain along the coast, there are a series of beaches, each covered in boulders of similar size and shape as those found in the cave. All of them were shaped by the sea. As storms blew, wind pushed water and waves were formed. And when these waves came crashing into the shore, they tumbled the boulders, giving them this rounded shape. So what about the boulders in the cave? The ones that sit trapped 220 feet above sea level. So those once upon a time, long time ago, well, those were once on the shore, and the cavern they rest in was a sea cave. Back from a time when glaciers sat here instead of homes, glaciers so massive that they weighed down the landscape, holding it 220 feet lower than where it is now. And it's things like that. That's what I'm looking for when photographing Acadia. Scenes that depict the area's natural history. Now, I can't leave people out completely. After all, we live here. I just try to see around them, which is hard to do sometimes. For example, we all know what it's like. We just want a quiet day on sand beach, but when we show up, there's just hordes of people there. Okay, well, there's not hordes of people in this photo. In fact, there's not even a footprint. So how could that be? Okay, well, we'll try something else. What about Thunderhole? That place gets bananas. No people again. Okay. Surely, if we were to go to a place like Bass Harbor Lighthouse, we'd find crowds of people there. There's no way around it. That place gets so busy. Where is everyone? There's a simple explanation to all of this. Photoshop. No, I'm joking. I did use Photoshop in this image, but it was to straighten out the lighthouse. The wide angle lens I was using to photograph this scene distorts anything in the corners of the image. The photo comes out of the camera, manipulated by the lens, and I use Photoshop to correct it and make it true to how our eyes would see it. Crazy, right? Using Photoshop to correct, not manipulate. But that's how I use it. I don't use it to say, erase people out of images. That's not how I get these shots, totally devoid of people. None of the images I'm going to show you tonight were digitally manipulated to hide the crowds. So how do I do it? In short, I just don't go where the people are. And it's a little more specific than that. And we'll get into all of that. But first, I want to tell you a story. Actually, first, I'm going to take a little sip of seltzer. All right. On June 25th, 2020, I had the opportunity to create an image for Men's Health magazine. That's a pretty big publication. I'd never worked with them, and it seemed like a good opportunity to start a relationship. They needed a shot of the Park Loop Road in Acadia. Now, this is Men's Health. I knew a simple shot of the Park Road wouldn't do it. It would need a human element. A man, a healthy man, on a road. I know, a bicyclist. I headed out early, found this beautiful perspective, set up before sunrise, waited for the light, and waited for the inevitable, a man on a bike to come zipping through my shot. Sunrise came, but the inevitable never did. No man, no bike, and I was left with this empty image of the Park Loop Road. The one time I actually wanted a person in my shot, and it didn't happen. And needless to say, Men's Health passed on the image. So feeling defeated, I packed up, headed down the road. Now I want you to remember this because I'm going to come back to it later on in the presentation. But for now, know that the rest of the morning ended up being one of my favorite mornings of photography of the entire year. I just ended up making some really satisfying personal work that morning. And I had the park road all to myself. Now, as I said, this was 2020, but we don't need a global pandemic to enjoy solitude in Acadia. It's all about timing. In July, the busiest time of the year for the park, if you go anywhere other than the summit of Cadillac Mountain at sunrise, you will have the place almost if not all to yourself. That's right. Ocean Drive at sunrise in July is almost completely empty of cars. Yes, sunrise is at 5 a.m. that time of year, which I'm sure has much to do with how empty it is. But in my opinion, it's also the most beautiful time of day to visit that area. Enjoying this place in solitude does come at a price. You have to get up early, stay out late, face the cold, brave the weather. In my opinion, though, it's well worth it. These are the times when Acadia is at its best. All right, everybody recognize this path, probably. Many of us have been down it before. Now, if you tried to walk down it during the holiday weekend in October, my wife and son did this past fall, and they were met with a blockade of tripods. There was no way past. Jessup Path is a major attraction for photographers in autumn, especially the weekend of and days following Indigenous Peoples Day. That's when all the out-of-town photography workshops visit Acadia, and believe me, they all go here. So what do you do if you want to visit this spot and enjoy the color? You go early. Most photography workshops end up here in the afternoon or late morning after photographing sunrise along the coast. So if you want this all to yourself, skip the sunrise and go here first. Besides, morning is when the magic happens. Fog is rare in these woods, but if it's going to happen, it happens early. And it's special. And how could we forget this guy? I should have showed the image of the two barred owls after Erich mentioned the park pass. But I've had the most luck viewing the barred owls in this area early and late in the day. It's like that with a lot of wildlife. Keeping to the edges of the day will increase your chances of quality wildlife viewing. I have news for you. Wild animals don't love people. So when a lot of us are around, they tend not to be. You certainly wouldn't find this scene in the middle of the day on Sand Beach. This was 6 o'clock in the morning. What was kind of cool about this experience, and this was a shot I always wanted, going off script here, but what was cool, it was so early in the morning that I was able to use, or I should say I needed a long exposure to get this image bright enough. So I have my camera on a tripod and the exposure is actually 5 seconds. So the shutter in the camera was open for 5 seconds and that deer stood there perfectly still almost the whole time, right around like 4.5 seconds. He turned his head and you can almost kind of see that in this image, how his head's a little lighter than the rest of his body. He moved a little bit, but sharp enough for me. All right, beehive. Another example of why to get out early. We all know how popular of a hike the beehive is, and people start up it early. So how do you beat the crowds here? Go earlier. Besides, you want to be up there for sunrise. When I go up here, it's still, I've got my headlamp on when I get started. And it's worth it. Beehive offers some of the most dynamic morning views in Acadia. You can watch sunrise, of course, or from the backside of the mountain, take in one of the most magnificent fall scenes in the park. Take another little sip here. So maybe you're not an early riser. That's not a problem either. Just go to Jordan Pond for sunset. I'm crazy, right? Jordan Pond. Hey, at 5 p.m. that parking lot starts to clear out, and by sunset it is quiet there. This is the summer I'm talking about. Other than the occasional Instagram influencer illegally flying a drone, but hey, compare that to the middle of the day when you can't even find parking. Jordan Pond can be very peaceful. And with the right clouds and with how far to the north the sun is setting in the summer months, you can get pretty fantastic sunsets there. Another favorite sunset spot of mine is Otter Point. Like Jordan Pond, you can't actually see the sun hit the horizon, but unlike Jordan Pond, Otter Point gives you views directly west with big skies. So all you need are clouds. And sure, you'll see other people there, but not many, and you don't need a reservation. When the park is at its most beautiful, everyone is either in bed or out to dinner or on Cadillac Mountain. So set your alarm and eat dinner late. Now, speaking of late, so at night, no matter the time of year, Acadia is at its quietest and arguably most magnificent. And the star of the show is the core of the Milky Way, which by the time summer rolls around is visible on any clear dark night as soon as twilight ends. Another image of the Milky Way here, and then the green that you see in this image is something called air glow, which can be caused by a number of different processes in the Earth's upper atmosphere. But to our eyes would just be a faint haze in the sky, as with that light pollution perhaps down below. Another less common but more vibrant phenomenon visible in Acadia's skies is the Aurora Borealis, here accompanied by a meteor, as well as some pesky clouds and more light pollution. So we've had a couple of really, really good showings of the Northern Lights in the last couple of months, and you should expect more over the next few years. So that's certainly something to look forward to. Even less common than the Northern Lights are comets. Last year's visitor, the comet Neowise, was a welcome sight and one of the most spectacular events I've ever witnessed at night. Again, a new comet was recently discovered and might even become visible before the end of the year. So keep an eye out for that. Another favorite nighttime event of mine is the appearance of bioluminescent life, like these fireflies photographed in the meadow above Jordan Pond. And there was only one other person here on this night, and I brought them with me. Now, with all these nighttime images, keep in mind that the camera is much more sensitive to light and has an easier time seeing all these nighttime scenes than our eyes do. But if you sit out at night and allow your eyes to adjust without looking at the back of your camera or your phone, you will see plenty. Now, my favorite time of year, and keep in mind, this is from a photographer's perspective, are the months of November and December, or the shoulder season. I know, sun goes down early, but what are you going to do? For many, this is when we take that first big breath after a busy and bustling few months. And that's what it feels like. It feels like a deep breath. And hopefully this guy out there fishing in his little kayak took a deep breath while he was out there amidst all of that. For me, this time of year is when the trails begin to beckon, promising quiet adventure. Also, the light gets better. Again, photographer, but better light benefits everyone. And if you really want to enjoy a sunset here in Acadia, there's no better place than Bass Harbor Head Lighthouse in November and December. The place is unapproachable in the summer, but who cares? The sun sets behind the rocks that time of year. You don't get the light. I don't know. I think it's, to me, this is the only time right now. This is the only time to go catch sunset there. So do yourself a favor, head down there next time it looks good. Another thing I look forward to this time of year is the weather, just because anything could happen. We could have fog. We could have sun. We could have snow. And of course, we could have big surf. And to me, this is when Acadia looks its best. I don't know, can't beat it. That's my favorite thing about this place. Come December, the shoulder season quickly turns into winter, and by January, Acadia is at its most peaceful and arguably its most beautiful. And with winter comes some of the most outstanding weather conditions of the year, much of which the visitors to this place miss out on. The star of the show, of course, is snow. We want snow. Nothing adds to the beauty of this place like it. And without snow, we end up with ice, which isn't fun to find on the trails, but it can add to the beauty in its own way. So despite how quiet Eagle Lake would have been any time of the day on this day, there still would have been people ice skating and fishing. So I stuck to the edges of the day while photographing to ensure I'd have it all to myself. Better light too. And another phenomenon retreated to only in the winter and typically enjoyed only by the hardiest of us is sea smoke. Now, it has to be really cold for this to occur, 10 degrees Fahrenheit or colder, but it's beautiful. If you haven't seen it, picture mist over a pond and then multiply it by 1,000. Yeah, it's like being on an alien planet or something. It's otherworldly. So my favorite part about winter in Acadia, though, is the unexpected. Now, yes, the unexpected can happen any time of year, but in winter, it's amplified. This I photographed last winter. So I was watching the weather and it was fairly warm one day. And then I saw that the temperature was going to take a nosedive and get really, really cold overnight. It was also very windy. So I knew something cool was going to happen somewhere. And this was early in the season. So all the lakes and the ponds were still open. All the fresh water was still open. So that's where I was going to head to, was a place like that. And I picked Jordan Pond. And so what had happened is, you know, the day before it was warm and it was windy and you had all that water splashing up over the rocks. And then the temperature took a nosedive and then all that water froze and it's almost everything's like dripping with ice. Really cool find. And then beyond that, there was also rime. So that temperature jump had caused fog over the water, and then that fog blowing in the wind, anything it landed on, it just froze and it turned into rime. And not just here along the shoreline, but I could see that it had happened up on Penobscot Mountain as well. So I, after photographing down along the pond, hiked up the ridge, and sure enough, the whole mountain was covered with this stuff. Looked just like this everywhere you looked. Not going to get that in the summer. And if you're in the mountains, do not forget about the chance encounter you may have with a very welcome winter visitor, the Arctic snowy owl. Something those who hike only in the summers will never see. Yeah, hiking in the summer. You get sweaty, there's black flies, there's no snowy owls. Sounds horrible. I'll stick to the winter. Speaking of hiking, so no matter the time of year or time of day, getting off the beaten path is another fantastic way to beat the crowds. Even if you're not a serious hiker, there are plenty of spots to get away to. So once on top of Cadillac Mountain, it doesn't take much to get away from the crowds. A short hike down any of the trails leading away from the summit, and you'll find yourself with Cadillac all to yourself. Wonderland is one of my favorite areas in the park, and it's a great spot for both sunset and sunrise. And the walk out there in the fall isn't that bad either. Now, yes, the parking lot fills up in the summer, but compare the number of cars there to Ocean Drive or Jordan Pond. Another fairly easy walk is the carriage road loop around Witch Hole Pond, where you get unique views of Cadillac Mountain, along with plenty of other beautiful scenery. And the parking at Eagle Lake can go bonkers, so head to Duck Brook Bridge and go in from there. Parking can be found there even a few hours after sunrise in the summer. South Bubble and Bubble Rock get pretty quiet at the end of the day and offer great opportunities for fall foliage viewing. The parking lot fills easily, but you won't have to wait long for a spot within a couple hours of sunset. And then the beech forest along Jordan Pond Carry, which you intersect on your way up South Bubble, is one of the best spots for late fall foliage. Another benefit to sticking around for the second half of October. And then some other fairly low impact hikes to get you away from the road include Beech Mountain, which boasts one of the best sunset views in the park, especially in the summer. And Gorham Mountain, which is hard to beat for mountain sunrise views. And you can check out that ancient sea cave on your way up to the summit. The Western Mountains are as quiet as it gets, no matter the time of year. No, you don't get the views like you do on the east side of the island, but there is plenty of beauty to be found on their wooded summits. And then driving or walking or biking along some of the forest roads on the west side of the island can be quite peaceful as well, especially if followed by a stop along the eastern shore of Seal Cove Pond at the end of the day. Most of us are probably familiar with Hadlock Falls. Not that it gets crowded up there, but how many times have you made that your destination after a good rainfall? I say go discover something new. Go explore. There's many more beautiful waterfalls in the park, and especially after a heavy rain. All right. Is there anything I'm forgetting? Any quiet places in Acadia that I'm forgetting? I know. How could I forget? Schoodic Peninsula. The Schoodic Peninsula section of Acadia it's just as beautiful and rugged as Mount Desert Island, but it's also much more peaceful, as many of us know. And I certainly shouldn't talk about getting off the beaten path without mentioning Isle of Ho. If you're looking to get away from people and still be within the boundaries of Acadia, there's no better place. Its dramatic coast and quiet forests are like something out of a fairy tale, which brings me to my last few examples of how to find peace in an otherwise busy place. Look for quiet moments. So I get lost in scenes like these. My head becomes filled with them. My peripheral shuts down. I block everything else out that's around me, and I'm able to just enjoy these small scenes as I find them. So earlier in the presentation, when I was talking about my morning photographing the park road, I said I was going to come back to that moment waiting for a person who never arrived, to add a human element to my image. So a bit earlier in the season, in 2020, I made this image along the road, up on Otter Cliffs. The night before, I'd had a dream, a nightmare, really. So I was with a young boy, older than my son, who at the time was 2, but this boy in my dream was clearly meant to be my projection of my son. We're running from a creature that looked much like the Blob, if you've ever seen that film, except that it had spines. It was constantly expanding and could squeeze into any space. And this was how it chased us, not by moving, but by expanding in our direction. So at the end of the dream, we were in a building. It followed us in. We would run into one room and close the door behind us, slowing it just long enough for us to escape into the next room before it broke through after us. So I pay attention to my dreams. It's my subconscious telling me what's actually going on in my head. And clearly this dream was about coronavirus. And what I learned from that dream was that I was afraid. I know what to expect whenever I round the bend on this road. But on the day I shot this in the spring of 2020, in a very empty feeling Acadia National Park, I'd had my doubts. Acadia needs people. And yes, the amount of people is overwhelming at times, but we shouldn't wish them away. Believe me, I love when November rolls around and we get the island back. But I also love summer when the crowds return and disturb our quiet with a little excitement. I like that. I need that. I need both. Maybe you do too, or maybe you don't, and that's okay. But we can still have this place to ourselves while sharing it with others. So I guess what I'm saying is, go out early, go out late, go out in the rain, go out in the cold, climb a mountain, or go somewhere you've never been. Just go out and enjoy this amazing place. All right, that's it for me. But I do want to thank Southwest Harbor Public Library for hosting me and ask me to give a presentation. And thanks to Erich and Kate for organizing this and moderating it. And of course, thank all of you for tuning in and for watching. And some of you may know, here I'm going to quit sharing my screen here. Maybe some of you may know that I have a shop on Main Street in Southwest Harbor, and just down the street from the library. But in December, I'm taking everything off the walls and I'm moving it down to the library, and we're going to have it up on the walls of the library for the whole month. And it's all going to be for sale. And a portion of what sells goes to the library, so you'll be supporting them. And the rest of it goes to my son's Christmas Lego fund, so you'll be supporting him. Yeah, so if you have Christmas shopping to do, that's certainly the place to go.
Thank you so much, John. So if any of you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand, and you can ask it directly. And then otherwise, we have a question from M. Taylor. When is the best time to see Northern Lights in Acadia?
Yeah. So over the next few years, the sun is going to be doing what the sun needs to be doing to up our chances of seeing the Northern Lights. Now, it could happen any time of year. Really the best way to catch it is to watch the forecast. Now, I have an app on my phone that is called Aurora Alerts. And, these forecasts, they're no good more than a couple of days out. So it's something you have to constantly be checking. And there are ways you can sign up to get alerts from the app and from certain websites. That's another way to do it. So yeah, there's no best time of year that'll up your chances. It could happen anytime. But really, the thing, you need clear skies, you need dark skies. So new moon is better. Winter is better. The skies are clearer in the winter. There's less, moisture in the atmosphere. So yeah, really get yourself one of those Aurora apps or check out one of the websites and maybe sign up for alerts. That's the best way to know.
We have a question from Craig that was curious about when you decide to take your photos in landscape and when you decide to take your photos upright.
Yeah, it all depends on the scene. And sometimes I will, shoot it both ways, but usually the subject matter dictates which orientation I'm holding the camera, horizontally or vertically, landscape or portrait. So it all depends. I find that I shoot vertically or in portrait mode pretty often around here. We have these long winding coasts, and we don't have big pointy mountains here. You know, they have it, photographers have it good out west. They have all these big pointy mountains, really obvious subjects. We don't have that here. So a lot of my images become about the foreground, and those foreground images become easier to compose in a vertical orientation. But then another consideration too is that the vertical image can add intensity to the image, whereas the horizontal image can be more calming. So that's another consideration when I'm composing.
Great. And Kate shared within the chat feature the Aurora Alert. So if anyone wants to take a look at that in the chat. And so we have Laura says, you touched on several great places for sunrise. Would you please recap your favorites?
Oh gosh. You know, it's interesting. I'll frequent a place for a while and then kind of get bored of it and move on. Or the time of year also comes into play, because I'll have all these kind of shots planned out sometimes a year in advance. And you know, so I'll just be like waiting for the right day to go and hit that spot at sunrise. But like when I'm leading people on photography tours or workshops, places that I feel like I have to hit up, not because they're popular destinations, but because I think they're going to give the best experience. One would be Otter Cliffs. Sunrise on Otter Cliffs is hard to beat, and you can practically drive right up to it. You know, and not to ignore some of the kind of like more classic places like Boulder Beach at sunrise just works in so many ways, and it works any time of the year. You know, there's other places like Monument Cove where in the summer the direction of the sun isn't right to, you know, maybe photograph that area. So I wouldn't be photographing Monument Cove in the summer. But then come November, December, the light's right at Monument Cove, so I might start frequenting that place. So really, it all depends on the conditions. It all depends on what the sun's doing, what the sky looks like. I'm kind of just following the weather, following the conditions, and doing what they tell me to do. But short answer: Otter Cliffs, Ocean Drive, can't go wrong for sunrise.
And so 2 questions. One is, where is Boulder Beach? And then also another question is, you know, how did photography become a calling for you?
Okay. Yeah, so Boulder Beach is kind of almost just at the base of Otter Cliffs to the north, directly across from where Otter Cliff Road intersects the Park Loop Road. And Boulder Beach is not an official name. I'm pretty sure, who knows, a photographer probably named it. You know, it's not, I don't think it's called Boulder Beach on any maps. But you go there and you certainly see why it's called that. It has all those perfectly smooth, rounded boulders. And, you know, there's just like a little herd path down to the beach. And then once you're out there, it's like walking on bowling balls. So it's not an, despite being right off the road, it's not an easy place to navigate, but is quite beautiful. And there's places, and there's an overlook above it that, you know, if you're not excited about the walking on bowling balls part of it, there's an overlook above it where you can look towards the cliffs. And then what was the second question?
Just how are you drawn to become a photographer?
Oh, that's a good question. You know, a lot of things all kind of came together at the same time. You know, I went to school for filmmaking, so there was an interest there when it came to cameras and light and that sort of thing. But you know, kind of what intersected that was a found love for nature. And I just found that, you know, still photography was the best way for me to communicate that. And also, you know, inspiration from other photographers. You know, an early inspiration of mine was a National Geographic guy named Franz Lanting. So I kind of like discovered his work at the same time I was discovering this love for nature, and I was just getting out of film school. All these things were happening at the same time. And Franz's images, I went to a exhibit of those. I'd never seen anything like that. I'd never seen, or I guess it made me realize that, nature photographs didn't just have to be documentative, they could also be artistic. So that was my big takeaway from that, and kind of the what added to the inspiration.
Have you taken any of these photos? Have they been taken with iPhones, or do you occasionally use a phone to take?
Nothing that I showed today, but I shoot with my phone all the time. Certainly like all the pictures of my family, of my kid, of my dog, for the most part, a lot of those I shoot on my phone. And the phones these days are awesome. They do a lot of the work for us. The computer in there is making a lot of artistic decisions for us. And the lens is still really small, the sensor is still really small, so printing big isn't really an option. But if you're, all you want to do is take pictures, and you're not going to blow them up 24 by 36, and maybe you like that the phone is making the image look good, then I say, shoot with your phone. There's no reason not to. Yeah, I shoot with mine all the time.
Barbara asks why it's so difficult to photograph Little Long Pond to get reflections in clouds.
uh I don't know, I'm the wrong person to ask. I find it really difficult to photograph it, so I don't go there a lot. No. So I mean, reflections, the water's got to be dead still, no wind. And that's one of the things, I mentioned earlier. I'm constantly chasing the conditions. If I'm out on my own doing personal work, and I'm oh, maybe I'll go photograph Jordan Pond, I'll look at the forecast and I'll look at the wind, and if the wind's blowing from the north, and if it's blowing kind of hard or just from the north at all, I know there's not going to be any reflections there, so I'm not going to go to Jordan Pond if reflections are what I want. So same with Bubble Pond. I mean, yeah, it's got to just be so still. Yeah, so that, I think, that would certainly add to your success rate, is making sure that you're only there on dead still days.
Dale asks, when's the best time to go to Thunderhole?
When it's closed. Yeah, if they don't want you anywhere near it, that's the best time to go. I know that, people say 2 hours before high tide, but high tide, depending on the day, could be anywhere between 8 feet and 13 feet. So that doesn't make much sense to me. But certainly an incoming tide, you're gonna have a little more force behind the water. But yeah, after a storm, I mean, that's really it. It's after a storm rolls through, that's when you want to be there. That's when the action's going to be. And in Thunderhole, to me, it's one of those places where, and I get why it's an attraction, but I still ask myself sometimes, like, why am I going to Thunderhole? There's all these other places that do the same thing. So Thunderhole certainly is on my list, if we have big surf, but that's not the only place I'm going. There's other spots along the coast, even right there where waves hit and you get even bigger splashes of water than Thunderhole will give you. I mean, I'm sure some of you have seen waves crashing up higher than Otter Cliffs as they hit. So yeah, that's part of that kind of like, go explore, go look for something new ideas.
If you had an opportunity to take a sabbatical somewhere and focus on photography, where's another place you'd like to spend time?
So well, the answer is New Zealand, but part of that is right around the time I moved to Maine, my sister moved to New Zealand. I haven't been to visit her yet, and it's a place I've always wanted to explore. And I mean, geez, it just looks beautiful. So yeah, if I was going to spend a long time away, I think it would be there, because I could kill two birds with one stone, do some photography, hang out with family. So yeah, that's my answer.
All right, well, thank you so much for this presentation. This has been great. And what I used to explore the wilderness in the Pacific Northwest, and often would have be in the right place, the right time, see a raven flying by. And I find when I'm in Acadia, if I'm at the right place at the right time, I often see you or some of your classes out there with peak leaves or peak light. So anyway, so it's fun to see you out there at work. So but yeah, so anyway, and Kate, can you come on and say hi and thank you for all your support? Great, thank you, Kate. So anyway, thank you everybody for coming out, and yeah, please come see John's show this next month at Southwest Harbor Public Library, and have a good night.
Thank you, everyone.